Hello. Okay, The Exorcist Believer, directed by David Gordon Green. This is supposed to be the true sequel to the 1973 original movie, disregarding and ignoring all the previous sequels, just like they did with the Halloween movie, starting back in 2018. I'm a big fan of that 2018 Halloween film, so I was really looking forward to seeing what David Gordon Green would do with the Exorcist franchise, with these movies. So yeah, and I'm gonna be honest here, I wasn't really compelled to watch the movie based on the trailers. Do you see what I did there? So yeah, the plot of the movie is we get these two girls who disappear into the woods and return 3 days later with no memory of what happened to them. The father of one girl seeks out Chris MacNeil, who's been forever altered by what happened to her daughter 50 years ago. You know, the original movie. So first of all, I feel like they did a really good job at capturing the atmosphere, that vibe and feeling of the original movie through the cinematography and the way in which the camera is used throughout the movie. I felt they did a really good job at doing that without it feeling like a cheap, forced imitation of just trying to, recreate that feeling and look of the original movie. It just felt right, and as a result, it really allowed to immerse me into this story, and it just had this kind of grittiness to it. It felt real, it felt earthy and grounded. The first half of this movie is the strongest. They do such a great job at character building. Like, I was able to emotionally connect to these characters and understand where these characters were at in life and their relationships with one another. And I felt like it's the first half of this movie that really kind of helps elevate or give the third act much more impact when it comes to sort of the emotional punch. It's this first, say, 45 minutes of the movie of very strong character building that really helps aid the third act for me. And you do just get a real good understanding at where these characters are at life, their relationships, and I just found myself emotionally connecting to them. They also do a really good job at creating tension and this sense of dread as well. There are a couple of moments that were uncomfortable to watch, and it's just that a lot of it's down to the way in which it's shot, but this is also elevated through the very strong performance from our leads. Like, everyone within this movie gives a strong performance, and it's these performances from our main cast that for me really helped allow me to get emotionally connected to these characters. It wasn't just down to the way in which the film is shot and through the cinematography, but the performances. I think if it wasn't for the performances from the cast, then perhaps it wouldn't have quite have had the same effect. But you've got Leslie Odom Jr. as Victor Fielding, Angela's father, who delivers a very real, grounded performance that says so much without saying so much. You get where he's at in life with himself, not only by knowing what's happened to him in the past, but how he expresses and carries himself through the movie. Leslie Odom is really good in this film. I really dug his performance. And we also get two great performances from our two young actresses who play the daughters. There are moments with their characters purely based on their performance that gave me chills, that gave me goosebumps. They deliver this unnerving performance that just didn't feel like a cheap or forced imitation of the original that we all know from the classic 1973 movie. I felt for these characters. I was emotionally connected, and I cared about these characters, and it's all down to their very real, grounded performances. I was really, really impressed by the two young actresses playing these girls, because it's not going to be easy to try and sell the horror and the pain that these characters are going through. There are moments, because of their performances, that made me feel uncomfortable and just emotionally affected by what these characters are going through. And yeah, I can't praise them enough. That, you know, there are moments that could have come across as very hammy or just very silly, but they hit every note. So it's moments within the second act and going into the third act where I felt like this film really started to stumble. And a lot of that is because I felt like they were trying too hard for this to be an Exorcist movie or an Exorcist sequel. Like, they really wanted to remind us that this was a sequel to The Exorcist. And I just felt like it came across just a little bit too forceful. Like, you've got the classic kind of possession exorcist tropes that we all know from that original film year, and it does end up sometimes feeling like the greatest hits of The Exorcist, but it's also the inclusion of Ellen Burstyn as Chris MacNeil that I felt, you know, this character's inclusion within this story for me personally just felt really forced. I could have seen her story working, but with how it was included within this story, just didn't quite work for me or felt natural. Her inclusion within this movie just really ended up feeling tacked on, and just, you know, she's in it just to remind us that we're watching an Exorcist movie. That's how it felt. It felt forced. Her character just felt forced into this story, and it's frustrating because I could see how her character worked with the ideas and the themes that they're exploring with this movie, with, you know, losing faith and just believing and all of that, which I really dug, by the way. You could have taken her character out and I felt like the film would have still worked, or the story would have still worked without her, and that's frustrating because I could see how her story fitted in within the themes and the ideas that they were exploring, but it's how her character was incorporated in the story just did not feel right. It just didn't work. So the core of this movie for me and what they were exploring with the story, it's all about these characters losing faith and believing in something, and just how things can happen in life to affect all of that. Like, it's this aspect of the story that really resonated with me, but I feel like they lose focus on this in parts, and especially going into the third act, it really kind of loses sort of emphasis on what I felt the movie was all about, the story was all about. And I just felt like they really kind of needed to retain that focus and emphasis of what it is that they are, you know, they are focusing on with these characters and their belief in God and sort of them losing faith and all of that. I feel like they really needed to sort of keep a focus on that for this to ultimately have a much stronger emotional punch than it already had, because I did feel for these characters, and a lot of it is down to their performances, but I felt like that emotional punch could have been stronger if the movie didn't lose focus on that. Unfortunately, it does lose focus on that because it becomes too much of a, I want to remind you that this is an Exorcist film. Like, this is the greatest hits of The Exorcist. And it's unfortunate because I feel like if they took certain elements away to stop reminding us that this is an Exorcist sequel, then I felt like the film would have worked better. But it's the exorcism scene within this third act and its climax that I still found very satisfying, and that's because they managed to subvert expectations in a way that I thought was very, very smart. Just I thought the way in which they did it was really clever. We've seen so many of them from previous films over the years, and I still think David Gordon Green here managed to do something that felt different. He did a great job at creating tension. I loved the use of the camera and the lighting within this moment during the exorcism, and just how it played out. It gave me goosebumps, it gave me chills, and again, a lot of that is elevated by the real strong performances from our cast, especially the two young actresses playing the daughters, and just the way in which the scene plays out. I don't want to say too much because this is spoiler free, but I just really liked what they did with this. There is a bit of a twist. They do something different, and it works, but it also highlights one of my frustrations with the movie, and that is the emphasis, the focus of what it is they're trying to say and explore with the story. And I feel like this is something that kind of follows David Gordon Green, especially with his Halloween movies, where I really liked a lot of the ideas and the themes that they are trying to explore and trying to sort of express through the story. But I feel like it's the execution of it where they kind of fall a little bit short. Look, I don't quite understand the Rotten Tomato score for this film currently. As I'm filming this review, I believe it's 20%. I've not really delved into or read any of the reviews, only some of the reactions on Twitter, the very brief reactions, and I don't quite understand it. I like this film. Don't get me wrong, it's not the greatest exorcism movie ever made, and we've had a few of them this year, and Talk to Me is far superior. If you want to see a really good possession movie, go and see Talk to Me. But The Exorcist Believer for me was still an immersive, dread-filled, tension-filled, emotional experience, an unnerving experience that I liked and appreciated what they were doing with the story. The film does have, for me personally, the first half, that first 40 to 45 minutes of the film is very strong with some great character building, and they do such a great job at creating this sense of dread and tension within the atmosphere, and I was immersed throughout this movie. Yes, there are some moments where I rolled my eyes, like you get sort of like this moment in the third act where, how can I say this without spoiling anything, but a priest returning, that's all I'm gonna say, the priest returns, and I was like, oh really, it kind of made me cringe. So but this film was good. I liked it. It's a solid film. It's a solid possession movie. When I came out of watching Talk to Me, I gave this sort of massive kind of sigh of relief, because it was such a tense, emotional experience, and one of the best horror movies released this year. With The Exorcist Believer, it's nowhere near sort of those kind of levels, but it still affected me emotionally. It still affected me because I could appreciate what it was they were doing. I cared about the characters. And so, yeah, it's a bit of a frustrating one. It's not a perfect film by any means, and it's got a lot of flaws, but there's a lot that I felt like they did right as well. So, yeah, that's what I thought of The Exorcist Believer, and I will be giving The Exorcist Believer a 7 out of 10. What did you guys think? Did you love it, or did you hate it, or are you like me where you're kind of sort of like, you like the film and you acknowledge that it's got a lot of flaws, but there's also a lot that really did work with it? Then please let me know and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to see future reviews from just some random Welsh geek ramble on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. My next reviews will be for Ahsoka episode 8, and just a recap on how I felt of the entire season 1 of Ahsoka, as well as a review for Blackberry, and I'm hoping to also catch Dumb Money, which would be a late review. But yeah, thanks for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be catching you guys soon.